What's going on, guys? Metal Music Junkie here, aka John Browning. And today's going to be part 2 of this series that I'm doing where I go through my favorite albums by year with decade. Yesterday I did the 1970s, and today I'm going to do the 1980s. So, without further ado, let's begin. Now, this one was actually kind of hard because, in my opinion, the 80s was when things really started kicking in for rock, for metal and hard rock. So, first up now we're in the beginning of the decade, in 1980. Really good year for music. I mean, you had Judas Priest, British Steel, the first Iron Maiden album, Van Halen, Women and Children First, The Cure, Pornography, Queen, The Game, Scorpions, Animal Magnetism, so many good ones. But, Black Sabbath, Heaven and Hell. So many good albums. But, in my opinion, this album cannot be topped in terms of albums from 1981. Or 1980. So, my favorite album of 1980 is Ozzy Osbourne, Blizzard of Oz. Now, obviously, this was his first solo album after being fired from Black Sabbath. And, I mean, this is not my favorite Ozzy album. The next one, Diary of a Madman, is my favorite, but this is a really close second. I mean, you can't go wrong with Ozzy with Randy Rhoads. I mean, this album's fucking great. I mean, I don't know. Crazy Train, which I could probably go the rest of my life without hearing that song again, but it's still an amazing song. Goodbye the Romance, one of my favorite Ozzy songs of all time. Suicide Solution, Mr. Crowley, No Bone Movies, Revelation, Mother Earth, Steal Away the Night. It's a fucking great album, man. So, my favorite album of 1980, Blizzard of Oz, from Ozzy Osbourne. Alright, now we're in 1981. Another great year for music. You have Van Halen, Fair Warning. What else came out that year? Iron Maiden, Killers. Black Sabbath, Mob Rules. Some really good ones. Now, if you would have asked me this question like 5 years ago, hey, John Browning, what is your favorite album from 1981? I would have said Ozzy Osbourne, Diary of a Madman. But, you know, I mean, I still love that album. It's my favorite Ozzy album, but looking through some of the albums from like 1981, I decided, you know what, this album's better. And so, my favorite album of 1981 is Moving Pictures by Rush. Now, I've always loved Rush, but like in the last year or so, I've grown to become like a big fan of Rush. I mean, they're not like my top 10 favorite bands of all time. I mean, they're definitely in my top 100. But I've grown a real big appreciation for Rush. And now, because back in the day I was like, oh no, Ozzy Osbourne all the way. Because, you know, I was such an Ozzy fan, which I still am. But I was like, mega Ozzy fan. Yeah, but this album, this is like a perfect album. This is my favorite Rush album. I mean, I can go the rest of my life without hearing Tom Sawyer. But I can't deny that it's an amazing song. Red Barchera, YYZ, Limelight, Camera Eye, Witch Hunt, Vital Signs. It's a fucking amazing album. So, my favorite album of 1981, Moving Pictures by Rush. Alright, now we're in 1982. Another great year for music. I mean, you had Scorpions, Blackout, Van Halen, Diver Down. I know some people don't like that album, but I love it. Venom, Black Metal. I mean, a lot of great albums that came out that year. I can go on. Oh wait, I said The Cure, Pornography came out in 80. It was actually 16 Seconds. That's the one I was thinking of. My bad, guys. So for 1982, it was hard because I had to pick between two albums. I almost went with Judas Priest, Screaming for Vengeance. And I love that album. It's one of my favorite Priest albums. But And I'm more of a Priest guy than a Maiden guy. I spoiled it. But looking at the list, they're kind of like equal for me, but I decide, fuck it, I gotta go with this. So my favorite album of 1982 is Number of the Beast by Iron Maiden. I mean, what can I say about this album that has not been said already? This album's a fucking classic. I mean, Invaders, Children of the Damned, The Prisoner, 22 Arcadia Avenue, Number of the Beast, Run to the Hills, and my all-time favorite Iron Maiden song, Hallowed Be Thy Name. The only song I don't really care for is Gangland, and the reason I said it's kind of equal to Priest, because there's one song on Scream for Vengeance I don't care for, and that's Fever. So yeah, my favorite album of 1982, Number of the Beast by Iron Maiden. Alright, now we're in 1983. Another great year for hard rock and metal. I mean, you had... Fuck, what came out that year? Iron Maiden, Peace of Mind, Slayer, Show No Mercy. The Misfits, Earth AD. That's another good one. Just a lot of really good albums. But... in my opinion, I can't talk about metal or hard rock from 1983 without talking about this album. And it's by my all-time favorite band. So, my favorite album of 1983 is Metallica's Kill 'Em All. In my opinion, this is the album that started thrash metal. And you could argue Venom or Exciter or hell even Judas Priest or Queen. But in my opinion, thrash metal as we know it started with this album. And this is a fucking great album. I mean, Hit the Lights, Four Horsemen, Motor Breath, Jump in the Fire, Anesthesia, Pulling Teeth, Whiplash, which is probably my favorite on here, Phantom Lord, No Remorse, Seek and Destroy, Metal Militia. This is a fucking perfect album. Just like Metallica's first five, in my opinion. So, my favorite album of 1983, Kill 'Em All. Now we're in 1984. One of the best years in hard rock and metal, in my opinion. Lots of great albums. Judas Priest, Defenders of the Faith, Iron Maiden, Power Slave, Van Halen, 1984. Venom, At War with Satan, Anthrax, Fistful of Metal. So many good albums that came out that year. Oh, Slayer, The Haunting of the Chapel EP. Dio, Lasting Line. Oh, that's another album I forgot to mention in 83. Holy Diver. Shit. Oh, well. But, in my opinion, I'm repeating it again, I cannot talk about 1984 without talking about this album. It's 2 albums in a row by this band, but I don't give a fuck. My favorite album of 1984 is Metallica, Ride the Lightning. Now, if Kill 'Em All was just raw, nasty, and fast, this one basically improved Kill 'Em All. This album right here is fucking amazing. Hot take, I think this is better than Master of Puppets. This is them really starting to come into their own. Better production, better songwriting, just so many fucking great songs on here. Fight Fire with Fire, Ride the Lightning, For Whom the Bell Tolls, Fade to Black, Trap Under Ice, and yes, I even like Escape on here. My favorite song on this album, Creeping Death, and the amazing instrumental of The Call of Cthulhu. So, my favorite album of 1984, Metallica, Ride the Lightning. Now we're in 1985, another really good year. I mean, Slayer, Hell Awaits, Megadeth, Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good, Anthrax, Spreading the Disease. So, now, unfortunately, I do not have this on vinyl or CD, but I pretty much know this album. My favorite album of 1985 is Bonded by Blood by Exodus. In my opinion, probably the greatest thrash debut of all time. That or Testaments to Legacy. So many great songs. Strike of the Beast, the title track, the song Exodus, Lesson in Violence. I mean, fucking amazing album, and definitely their best album. Rest in peace to Paul Bailoff. So, my favorite album of 1985, Exodus, Bonded by Blood. Alright, now we're in 1986, another one of my favorite years in rock and metal. And so many great albums came out that year. Megadeth, Peace Sells, But Who's Buying, Creator, Pleasure to Kill, Overkill didn't release. I was thinking Feel the Fire, that came out the year prior. I should have done my homework. Iron Maiden, Somewhere in Time. I mean, so many great albums came out that year. And most people are like, oh, Metallica Master of Puppets is the best album of 1986. Now, I don't agree with that. But it is fucking great. I think it's one of their best albums for sure. But I'm not so sure. But it's not my favorite. So the only other logical answer, at least to me, has to go to my favorite album by my second favorite band of all time. So, my favorite album of 1986 is Rain and Blood by Slayer. Metallica may have started thrash metal. This album right here perfected thrash metal. I mean, every song is a 10 out of 10. Angel of Death, Piece by Piece, Necrophobic, Altar of Sacrifice, Jesus Saves, Criminally Insane, Reborn, Epidemic, Postmortem, Rain and Blood. This is in my top 5 favorite albums of all time. This is one of the few albums I would call a 10 out of 10. It's the one album I could listen to all the way through from start to finish and never get tired of it. So, my favorite album of 1986, Rain and Blood by Slayer. Alright, so now we're in 1987, and not a really good year in music. I say it about any year, because anytime there's a release, a lot of cool releases in a year, I say it's cool. So, there's a lot of really good albums. Anthrax, Among the Living, Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction, Testament, The Legacy, Overkill, Taking Over, Sodom, Persecution Mania. A lot of great albums that came out that year. But, in my opinion, no album from 1987 can top this. So, my favorite album of 1987 is Scream Bloody Gore by Death. Now, there's this debate going on, who started death metal, Death or Possessed? Now, Possessed made the first death metal song with death metal, and this may have probably been the first, death metal album, that or Morbid Angels, Altars of Mat. So with this is still death metal, but this is pretty much like a thrash album with harsher vocals and harsher lyrics. So, you can kind of call this death metal. In my opinion, the first true death metal album, as we know it, was Morbid Angels, Altars of Madness. Yeah, but this is my all-time favorite death album. They've never made a bad album, but this is my favorite one. Infernal Death, Zombie Ritual, Denial of Life, Sacrificial, Mutilation, Regurgitated Guts, Baptized in Blood, Torn to Pieces, Evil Dead, the title track, Beyond the Unholy Grave, Land of No Return. Every fucking song on here is a banger. So my favorite album of 1987, Scream Bloody Gore by Death. Alright, so now we're in 1988. Another great year in music. You had Iron Maiden, Seven Sons, Seventh Son, Slayer, South of Heaven, Megadeth, So Far So Good So What, Anthrax, State of Euphoria, Testament, The New Order. I can go on. But my favorite album of 1988 is my all-time favorite album by my all-time favorite band, is Injustice for All by Metallica. Now, I know what some of you are saying. This album's not their best because of the bass, blah, 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 blah. Look, I get it. What I say is, you are right. To you. And I'm right to me. Fair? We get it? Alright. But yeah, every song on here is great. Black End, Justice for All, Eye of the Beholder, One, my all-time favorite Metallica song, Short of Straw, Harvester of Sorrow, Freight Ants of Sandy, To Live Is to Die, Diver's Eve. It's a fucking great album. And to me, this is Metallica at their most progressive and creative level. To me, this is like their creative peak right here. So, my favorite album of 1988, Injustice for All by Metallica. Alright, finally, we're in 1989. Now, 1989 was actually a pretty hard year for me to pick for music, even though it's not one of the greatest years in music. It was still pretty hard. I had to pick between 4 albums. Faith No More, The Real Thing, fucking great, fucking amazing album. Morbid Angel, Altars of Madness, one of the best death metal records of all time. And Sepultura, Beneath the Remains, one of the best thrash albums of all time. And yet other great albums that came out that year, like Nirvana's Bleach, Soundgarden, Louder Than Love, Obituary, Slowly We Rot. Like, a lot of great albums came out that year. But I decided to go with this album as my favorite of 1989. Not really metal like the rest of them were, but this is my favorite nonetheless, and I don't give a fuck. So my favorite album of 1989 is 9 Inch Nails' Pretty Hate Machine. I mean, this is probably one of the best debuts ever, in my opinion, like in all of music. I mean, Head Like a Hole, which is probably the first 9 Inch Nails song I've ever heard. Terrible Lie, Down in It, Sanctified, Something I Can Never Have, Kinda I Wanna, Sin, That's What I Get. I mean, this album's fucking great. So, my favorite album of 1989, Pretty Hate Machine by 9 Inch Nails. Alright, so that's it for this video. My next video, I'll be going over the 90s. So, as I always say, please like, comment, subscribe. Don't gatekeep. Treat others the way you want to be treated. And rock on.